Friends, greetings to everyone on the channel. Zelensky not only ordered to ban TV channels in Ukraine, establish a single tele-marathon, arrest journalists, bloggers, impose sanctions on those who are abroad to close access to their YouTube channels from the territory of Ukraine. They're not just arresting people for expressing their own opinion. Zelensky is panically afraid that Ukrainians will receive truthful stories about his military crimes. In this video, I want to show you what happened to the Ukrainian army on February 24, 2022, on the day of the next invasion of the Russian Federation into Ukraine. So, at about 4:05 a.m. on February 24, 2022, Russia began a mass invasion of Ukraine in different directions and in particular through Belarus in order to capture Kyiv on the short way. For me, this was all a surprise because I, like many millions of Ukrainians, did not have intelligence data and received only the information that was in the media, and accordingly, there was nothing reliable published. 4:05 a.m. Kyiv time, through live broadcast from Ukrainian border points on the border of Belarus and Ukraine, I live watched as hundreds of units of military equipment of the Russian Federation without an obstacle enter Ukraine without a single shot, as if on a parade. It was just incredible to watch as the foreign army enters Ukraine and there is no resistance at all. The border was open, there were no Ukrainian troops there. The Kyiv region on the road from Belarus to Kyiv was instantly occupied, captured and taken under control by the Russian army. And what was happening at that time with the Ukrainian army? It turned out that only during the day, think about it, on the day of February 24, 1922, the Ukrainian army had just begun to leave the military bases, the barracks. On the video taken by the Kyiv people that day, from their phones, they were just walking down the street and showing how a huge number of Ukrainian military vehicles, a huge number of tanks were just stuck in traffic jams in Kyiv and could not actually move to the front. See what was happening at that time as Russia already entered the Kyiv region. What was happening in Kyiv at that time? That Ukrainian military equipment, a huge number of tanks, another equipment, trucks with a personal composition with the army are just standing in the traffic jams in Kyiv for hours. They are trying to get through somehow, but it turns out badly. They are forced to just stand and wait. Think about it, the war is going on, Russia has already occupied cities, and the Ukrainian army is just standing in the traffic jams in Kyiv. That's how Ukraine was preparing for the invasion of the Russian Federation. That is, the entire army, a huge number of armies in particular which was dislodged in Kyiv. It was just sitting on the bases, on the military bases, and they learned and began to move out. I had a question, what was it? In April of 1922, that is, a little more than it.
У меня возник вопрос, а что это было? В апреле 22 года, то есть спустя чуть больше месяца.
Month after this event, in the American newspaper Wall Street Journal, a detailed, huge article of the investigation comes out, where it is reported that back in January of 1922, the director of the CIA, William Burns, visited Kyiv on purpose and met Zelensky. During this meeting, he gave Zelensky a detailed plan to capture the Russian Federation of the territory of Ukraine, and in particular, a plan to enter Belarus in the direction of the Gastomir for the occupation of Kyiv. That is, Zelensky received all this information in January of 1922. What does Zelensky do? According to all the media in Ukraine, his entire team, deputies, heads of the faction, representatives of the government told that the information about the attack of the Russian Federation is a fake, in their words. And those who spread this information are the enemies of Ukraine. Moreover, just before the attack on February 24, Zelensky filmed a video addressed to the Ukrainians where, as the president, he speaks and says that the information about the invasion of the Russian Federation is a fake. Ukrainians need to relax, not to do anything, calmly live on, and, in his words, in May 2022, Ukrainians will simply celebrate May holidays, go to shashliks and so on. In April, we mark a big day. In May, as always, the sun, the weekend, shashlik, the day of victory. Just think about it, the president of the state, receiving information about the invasion of the foreign army, specifically begins to slaughter his citizens, Ukrainians, so that they do not do anything, do not evacuate. And at the same time, the UN does the same thing in relation to the army, keeps it in barracks in cities so that they do not move abroad, so that they do not interfere with the implementation of the plans that he received from the director of the explosion. What is happening? After Russia voted in Ukraine at 4:05 a.m., it got into the media, and the Kyiv people learned about it not from Zelensky's government, but from the media. And they began a mass evacuation. Accordingly, they all left on the road and got into traffic jams. After that, the Ukrainian army woke up too, opened the phones, oh, they attacked us, and began to slowly leave the barracks of military bases and stuck in the same traffic jams. And that's it, she was stuck there for hours. And at the same time, Russia was already occupying a huge number of cities, villages. The Kyiv region took up positions and began to move to Kyiv. And at this time, the army of Ukraine is just hanging out in traffic jams. As I have already told in many of my videos, Zelensky uses the war in Ukraine in order to preserve his power and not to hold elections. That is, the longer the war, the less it is necessary to hold elections. The mass media are prohibited, the freedom of speech is prohibited, you can rule endlessly. That is, it is profitable for him to continue the war, of course. However, I have a question. What specific motive did he pursue as of February 24, 1922? He specifically launched the RF army and kept Ukrainian troops at military bases so that they would not resist the occupation, in order for them to immediately occupy Kyiv and the rest of the cities. And he was happy that everything worked out for him, or he tried to have an immediate occupation of as many territories as possible. And in order for Russia to commit more crimes according to his plan, then it was to spread the media and tell that Russia has committed such tragedies. It was impossible to negotiate with it, how much it occupied everything. Now we need to fight for 20, 30, 50 years to free it and thus motivate the continuation of the endless war. I have no doubt that Zelensky deliberately launched Russia, deliberately gave it the opportunity to capture as many territories as possible. The question is just why he did it on February 24, in order to surrender Kyiv and run away, or in order to simply give Russia the opportunity to capture territories, and then motivate this fact within. Endless war for liberation. After the article in the Wall Street Journal, the power of Zelensky, the representative of the National Security Agency, publicly stated that yes, it is true, they received this information, but they did not take advantage of it. They did nothing to build up the defense in the direction of the Gostomel of Belarus because, in their words, they simply did not believe that it was true. They simply said to the Ukrainians, we did not do this because we did not believe, and so they justified themselves in front of the Ukrainians. After that, in Ukraine, mass media started to close the media, arresting journalists and bloggers, completely suppressing the freedom of speech in order for the Ukrainians not to comment on this and not to publish the story about it. For example, on Facebook, just in March 2022, a person published a post saying that if Zelensky had warned the Ukrainians about February 24, then the tragedies that occurred in the Kyiv region simply would not have happened. And what happened next? For the fact that a person wrote about this a year later, that is, the post was already written in March of 1924. They had not reached their hands at that time, but in 1923 they found this post and arrested the SBU. The Security Service of Ukraine arrested this person and placed him under surveillance for the fact that he wrote about these words on Facebook. There is a decision about this in the court register, you can find it, I made a separate story about this. And that the Ukrainian court recognized this person guilty of criminal offense, that he is a criminal because he dared to write such words on Facebook, so that if Zelensky warned, there would be no tragedy. Think about it, these words are a criminal offense in Ukraine. Actually, this video that I am shooting is already 8 years of colony in Ukraine. Why is this happening? Maybe Zelensky is panicky, afraid that this information that I say got into his ears. Accordingly, he is imposing sanctions on bloggers, journalists, political scientists who are talking about this. He is imposing sanctions on RNBO, after which these RNBO sanctions go to YouTube and YouTube blocks channels of sanctioned people for access from Ukraine. In order to bypass the blockade, because potentially we can all be blocked, all bloggers, and he already does this several times, there were rounds of blocking of bloggers. In order to avoid blocking, you need to change the region of YouTube viewing from Ukraine to any other country. In the open settings, if you have Ukraine, change to any other country, and then all channels blocked by the RNBO sanctions will be available to you again. Because Zelensky, as soon as he sees that there is some compromising information on YouTube, he immediately imposes sanctions against the channel's author, sends this letter to YouTube, and YouTube automatically blocks access to the territory of Ukraine in order to change the region. This is the situation. We have to tell the truth from abroad, because in Ukraine all this is now punishable by law. Thank you for your attention.